The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
All right. Welcome to the Dukes Court tonight. I'm here with my co-host, Broadway Chris Fletcher, Gary the Assassin Kinn, and I'm Dave the Mad Stork Finoli. How are you tonight, gentlemen?
How are you doing, Mad Stork?
Oh, man.
Oh, ready for a little sports magic, my friends.
You better believe it. Well, tonight we're going to begin the show with, as you know, Fletch, one of my favorite subjects. We're going to talk about high school sports and the divide between private schools and public schools, which seems to be widening as we go on. I had been reading an article that it's now into the Pennsylvania legislature where State Senator Scott Martin, instead of trying to make taxes cheaper or certainly take these damn potholes out of the roads I travel on, is wanting to make the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association run a little smoother. His idea, which I guess has merit in some end and doesn't in others, is the fact he wants to make boundary schools and non-boundary schools. He doesn't want to claim they're public or private, but in essence, what a boundary school would be is you can't recruit among other schools within the boundary. Doesn't mean you can't recruit, but you just can't recruit among other schools within the boundary. And the non-boundary schools, which in essence would be the private schools, which apparently just about every Western Pennsylvania superintendent has decided is their most important thing to take care of, is basically mad because the private schools are winning most of the state championships. Now, I'll start off by saying, as far as myself, understand that there is recruiting going on among the private schools. If people think that public schools aren't recruiting, I know in my own public school here that's certainly not the case, because they when they entered back in big-time local football, it was because of kids they were bringing in from out of areas. I don't see the sense of this thing basically claiming it's okay to recruit as long as it's not among your little area here. And quite frankly, if I was a parent and I knew my kid had talent to get a scholarship and basically, was going to be one of the lone ways he could get into college is to get a scholarship, and a private school came to me and offered him a scholarship to play there, which would have given him a better opportunity, I'd have taken it in a second. So I guess bottom line, I think high school sports is out of control anyway. I think they're doing exactly what they're blaming the public schools for or private schools for doing. And my bottom line is I don't care about recruiting. If they want to recruit, go to town. If they want to separate it, I don't care, but superintendents need to pay more attention to the academics rather than if they can get a trophy or not. Fletch, what are you thinking about this?
Well, I think parents have the right to send their child to the school for whatever reason they want. I mean, I don't see people getting bent out of shape if a kid goes to another school because they have a better music program. But,
right.
The way this is all playing out is the time of private schools, they're winning like nearly 70% of Pennsylvania's boys and girls state titles over the past 3 years. And in boys basketball, the private or charter schools, I think they won something like 9 out of 12. So, and many of those, they were blowouts.
Yeah.
So the reason the legislature even has to get involved with this, Dave, is because they did in the first place. I mean, this dates back to the early 70s where they brought these, the legislation came in that brought the public and private schools together. So I guess that you really need the legislation to be able to tear that apart. But, talking about what you were saying, I agree 100%. Let's focus on academics. Who gives a rat's ass about the sports part of it in the bigger picture of things? And maybe they can do something like what they do in Illinois, where they have this thing, and I think they call it the success adjustment policy. Who named that? That's a beautiful thing to talk about. So the way that basically works is if non-boundary schools in Illinois win 2 state titles over 4 years, they're automatically bumped up one class. And then if that team doesn't win another title in its first 2 years at the new classification, they get moved back. So it's sort of like a Premier League for high schools.
Which I don't mind the concept of doing that. I don't even mind going back to the 70s where you had the Pittsburgh or the Pennsylvania Catholic Leagues, which my school, Greensburg Central Catholic, was part of. But trying to block kids from recruiting and make that the central issue here when the public schools, I think that to me is what offends me most about this, as much as the superintendents putting their focus on this issue.
Well, I think that the PIA is just, it's hypocrisy at its finest. It always has been.
Yeah.
Gary, you've got a lot of those big teams out in the Philadelphia area.
I was going to say, your area is causing this problem, Gary.
Damn you, Gary.
Well, that's right. It goes back to the fact I shouldn't have moved those 30 years ago. We wouldn't have this balance upset here in this class. But, it's funny, though. It's funny how different it is, guys, and it's interesting because, I don't hear a lot of talk about this at all. Honestly, Dave, when you threw out the topic, I had to read a little bit about it. And honestly, it's not something that back here seems to be as much of a hot button. And I think the primary reason is although they may be winning those titles, and maybe it's me too, not having kids go through athletic programs in high school and stuff like that. Maybe I'm not paying as much attention, but I don't really even hear about it as much in the press or on anywhere because, quite frankly, I don't think high school sports here are as big of a deal. I don't think it's as passionate. I don't think it's as small as intimate. I think it's a big deal to the people that are involved with the program or whatever, or that are winning state championships. But I think because of the market size and everything else, I don't hear as much about the controversy as I think you guys might be hearing. Or I guess the PIA is probably based in Harrisburg, where high school sports are a huge aspect of life there and money and everything else. That I think that's why this topic is probably becoming a little bit more prominent from those markets. But one of the reasons I think in basketball is, the charter schools in Philadelphia are the only schools, I guess there's a few exceptions, maybe some private high schools and stuff like that, that would be exception to that. But the charter schools are where all the kids who, or have any brains at all, either their own or their parents' own, are really going. The city schools are just abominable and nobody's going to them and everybody tries to get away from it. And I guess some of the charter schools and stuff like that actually have sports teams now, so they're probably getting the parents that are smart enough to realize, hey, my kid has a chance, and if he can get in there and they're offering him something to play basketball there or perhaps even football, why wouldn't you take it as opposed to going to what basically amounts to just a study hall or detention hall for 4 years and you learn nothing. So, taking that away from a kid who can do that either because he has the athletic talent or a family that realizes, hey, maybe he'll get a chance out of this, I don't know how you regulate against that. I think the public schools complaint goes back to the same old thing. You're going to call me a heartless you-know-what, Fletch, but it goes back to money. I think the big public schools were used to being huge, and the way the classifications were from single A to double A to triple A to quad A, now they're getting their pie eaten a little bit, and they don't like it. And, they don't really want to adjust their business model, so to speak. And Dave, you're probably right. They're probably doing some recruiting anyway, but apparently they're not doing it effectively. So, similar to what we see in some other sports, now they want the rules changed, and they have a stronger lobby probably than some of the private schools do in Harrisburg. I don't think in high school sports that the driver should be money, but money's a factor. If you have a major college or major high school football program rather, and you're selling 10,000 tickets, 7 Friday nights a year, I can understand focusing on that. I'm not quite sure why we need politicians in Pennsylvania focusing on that, but I can understand an administrator focusing on it to a degree. And I don't know how you would enforce some of this stuff. Certainly the NCAA has never been able to do it at the collegiate level. But, if somebody comes to you and says, hey, I want to go to your high school because I think I have a chance for a basketball scholarship or a football or even a baseball scholarship, and I can do it. And I have relatives who live there. I don't really see the harm in that. If you're going out to them and you're offering incentives of something that has no business being in high school sports, then I think you really should suffer the penalties for that. That's a very tough enforcement job, though. How you would find it, I don't know. Certainly the press, maybe in Western Pennsylvania it's a little bit different. The press doesn't follow this stuff as closely. I think abuses there should be some rules against, but I don't really have a big problem against this recruiting either. I mean, and particularly if somebody's coming to you. I mean, if you offer a private school education and you offer them the money to play sports there, and you have it, what's wrong with that? What, because the public schools can't do that? I mean, that's life. I mean, that's just the way that it is. It's a private business. And the educations are better in many urban settings. So, I mean, what would you expect people to, and why is that bad? How is the kid hurt in that regard? I mean, I don't understand why that's such a. I guess maybe the reason is because there are some abuses out there, which honestly I'm not aware of. But I'm not quite sure why I think this is such a huge problem that we have to have politicians get involved to settle it. I mean, maybe you want to give the PIA a little more teeth that says, hey, this high school over here is doing X and Y, or they give somebody's parents a car or something. I got a big problem with that. But I don't got a huge problem with somebody coming to you or somebody just saying, hey, I'd like to come to school there to play, and I can do it, and I'm within the rules doing it. I don't know why there's a big problem with that. So I'm a little bit confused, honestly. So
you look in what a private school can offer. Now again, some different than others, but generally, kids have a much better chance at obviously getting a college scholarship out of some of these places in athletics, but they also have a better chance of being prepared for college in these places. And the statistics rule that out, or certainly back that up. And it offers, I mean, I was in a Catholic school 16 years. It does offer a better discipline and a better focus.
And 6 of those years were in high school, were they not?
6 in high school and probably 4 in kindergarten. But I mean,
what has caused this whole controversy? Is it just the title differential, or is there some other reason? I guess.
Well, I think the title differential is definitely a big part of it, but I guess, guys, the thing that we're missing, it comes back to a really fundamental issue of how we fund our schools too. I mean, there is a disparity depending upon where you live, and that to me is the bigger issue. If you want to talk about sports, fine, but to me, it's why is a student in Upper St. Clair getting so much more of an educational experience than somebody who is in a poor rural area. That's what the legislator should be talking about, not about the sports. That's secondary.
Right. Well, the end of this is what the stupidest thing of Pennsylvania academics are, and in my mind, it's the school board system. You have a bunch of people there. In mine, we just spent $300,000 on a electronic scoreboard for our field. Who the hell needs that? We a few years ago we spent a ton of money to build a huge press box. For what? So one person can watch the game. It's ridiculous what these school boards are doing.
That's what's
causing these inadequacies. Yes,
right. They're using our money and everybody else's money. It's easy to do, and then they think that that's the answer to the search. But it still goes back. Doesn't it go back to the search for some revenue, though? It has to be. I mean,
well, they're not getting the revenue from these things. They're claiming it, but they're building these magnificent facilities. They're not renting them out often. They're not generating the kind of cash they can generate. If we built a new football stadium and rented it out to the Riverhounds, rented it out to minor league football, rented it out to other schools for activities so they can make money on it, that's fine. But that's not what's happening.
It just sits there with taxpayer money, and we got the ego of, look at the football stadium we have. And then Then there's the complaint that, well, we're not winning because the private schools are recruiting. Is that the flow of events? Yeah, well, that doesn't make a stitch of sense to me. Look at your own situation. Look at your own, whatever you want to call it, business model or financial budget or whatever. You made that decision. Recruiting isn't the only reason that you're in trouble. So,
No. And public schools are hiding Joe Blow from Mississippi in somebody's grandmother's house and claiming they're living there. So public schools are doing this, in my eyes, a lot more unethically than private schools are doing it.
Yeah, because a private school just come out and says, we're offering you this education, and we'll give you won't have to pay to come here for 4 years or whatever. You come here, or 2 years, or whatever it is, whereas the public schools, now maybe the rules are forcing them to sweep him through the closet, or he has to sleep in the closet. But, again, that's just the nature of the thing. One's private, one is public.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know how you fix that just through sports. I think that's a bigger issue than just sports. Right. I'm with you guys.
Well, the other thing that needs to be addressed is just the sheer number of school districts that we have in the state. That is a problem, too.
Yeah.
And it leads to an incredible waste of funds. And again, you know, I keep harping on it, but, you know, we shouldn't have such different educational experiences across our schools in Pennsylvania. And it shouldn't be determined by how much money is in that community. It's just the equity issue to me is bigger in academics than it is in sports. Sports is just the sign, and maybe this opens up that other conversation. I don't know, but you know, and I can understand why the legislature's getting involved, because the legislature got involved in the first place, which they should never have done.
Right.
Well, apparently there's a PIAA oversight committee, as I was reading this article, that has been in place for years. So this apparently is not just something that they're getting involved in now. Apparently they've always been involved in it. But you make a great point about the inequality, Fletch, and to me that's why if the state is getting involved in something, they should get involved in developing school systems and running the school systems, and not leaving it to inexperienced people to run, some of who want good football programs, and that's their focus.
That's
you know, I look at the Blackhawk area. I mean, some of the school board members there, I went to school with in high school, and they weren't bright then. And they're the ones making some of these decisions. Now, two of my business partners sit on school boards, one in the Moon School District and one in the Cornell District. And they tend to be the voices of reason on the school boards that they're involved with. And it's, you know, I got a call a few times asking me to run for school board in Woodland Hills, and I said, there's no way in hell I'm going to do that, because it's a thankless job. It's something that I don't know that I have the qualifications to do, but you know, we're putting a lot of and the problem is there's such apathy that, you know, they have the meetings where they talk about academics, they talk about sports, and the communities that are involved, the people don't go. They just don't become part of the process, and I think that just goes to the larger problem when we're talking about our schools here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah. I guess what most makes me curious about this, guys, is where is the pressure primarily coming from? Like, that would be the most interesting. Is it coming from parents?
Oh, it's coming from parents.
Yeah, I mean, where is the pressure coming from here? Like, I think that would be, that's something, not knowing a lot about this, but just trying to get a little bit up to speed. Like, I'm trying to figure out where is the primary pressure coming from.
I would tell a lot. The pressure of the supervisors binding together to go and make an issue of this is probably coming from the school boards, which hold their fates in their hand. And the school board is made up of the parents who think this should be the focus of the money, and this should be the focus of what makes their school valid. And it's not all of them. And as you said, Fletch, there's certainly a lot of good people in school boards, but there's not enough of them.
Right.
And to me, that's where the pressure's coming from, Gary. It's coming from the superintendents wanting to keep their jobs and knowing that the school boards are pushing this because that's what's important to the parents. That's what's important to these people that we've elected.
Mm-hmm. Well, but the trouble though with that is that you're talking out of both sides of your mouth. And here's what I mean by that: if you had an inner city school that was recruiting and was winning titles.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if your focus is so much on winning titles, it's a bad thing. But at the end of the day, that money coming into the bucket that it might be getting, whether it keeps 10 cents of those tickets or whatever they end up doing, or playoff games or whatever, that's ultimately a good thing. Now, whether or not the money's used properly might be another story. But how is
There's
that?
There's really not that much money coming in on these things. I mean, there's more money going out than coming in. There's a lot of things that the kids, the families who have kids playing sports, they have to cover. Where, you know, there's sales all the time. There's not a lot of money that comes in on these things.
The booster,
even on
a friend of mine is a booster on that.
Harrisburg,
they have to raise $40,000 a year $40,000 a year for football. $11,000 is to feed them during training camp.
Okay.
Why? This is probably the high percentage of it coming back from the parents and their friends and their families having to donate. I mean, I've been through it with my daughter, and it's a bullshit venture that parents are just ending up covering a lot of these costs for.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. Because I would have thought, I don't know, maybe I need to take my hat off differently, but I would have thought if you have a poor school that did a little bit of recruiting, if you really cared about the education part of it, that ultimately could level the playing field a little bit from where they are. But I guess it doesn't really work that way. I guess it doesn't really. Like if you ran all the way to a title in Harrisburg, you're not. It's not like college sports, even professional. You're not getting the benefit of that as far as money into your bucket. It just goes to whatever. It goes to a school district or something else. So then, yeah, okay. I'm just trying to make sure I understood that.
Sure, not a problem. And what you say is philosophically correct. I don't see it being done properly, and I think Fletch is right. I don't think the money is coming in the way it should, and to be making these expenditures, and they are probably losing money. I mean, if boosters are having to raise that kind of money, $40,000, just blew my mind when he told me that.
It's a lot of money.
$11,000 to feed them.
Yeah.
There must be a whole pack of Finolis there if they're just feeding them that much money.
That's a lot of hot dogs and steak sandwiches and stuff. That's a lot. That's a lot. I agree. So. No,
but I think it's very interesting from what you say in the East that this is a West problem.
Well, they don't. Maybe it might be because it's just more lawless. I mean, I'm not going to make any bones about that. I mean, I think it's a much bigger metropolitan area where it's not quite as insular or as tight or anything. It's spread out over far more miles. I mean, I think you kind of expect back here that I don't want to use the word corruption, but that's what comes to mind. You kind of expect that rule bending is what's expected. So, and there's a lot of they're big cities. They're big cities with a lot of entertainment options and stuff like that. I just don't think now I could be dead wrong. It might be because of my own life, but I just don't get the sense here that there's much looking at the sports pages or listening to stuff or even watching the stuff. I don't get the sense that they really spend a lot of time thinking it's a big problem back here. Now it might be because they're winning. They might be winning too just because of sheer size. I hate to say it. I mean, you got 6.6 million people versus 2.
Right.
It could be partially that, but I don't get the sense, at least I could be wrong, but I don't get the sense once you get east of Lancaster that there's a lot of people spend a lot of time really talking about this or debating it. For years there was the PIAA, then WPIAL separated from it. And then here in the east, they wouldn't even let the Philadelphia schools be involved. Now, it was more stuff activity and bad behavior in the 60s, but they kind of operate under their own back here. I think some of the private schools are probably pretty well heeled. Some of the income levels and some of that stuff back east, and some of the people that have gone up through that system and had a lot of success. They probably to them some of the money that we might be talking about might be a drop in the bucket. They might do it themselves. So they're kind of like, well, this is standard operating procedure. We have a good basketball program. We're going to keep it going. This is what we do. Right? There's a kid across the street wants to come here. Give him a chance. We think he can play. A few people think he can play. Bring him over here. I just don't think they think it's as big of a deal here, in my view, as they might in Pittsburgh. And it's because of popularity is probably a little bit less, attention's a little bit less, and it's probably a little bit more standard operating procedure. People change jobs a lot more in the East, and they do it not for always the right reasons. They do it because somebody gave them 4% more. So, if in the East, whether you got a high school kid that can play really well, and some school's coming after him, or he wants to go there, and it's within the rules, go do it. It's just I think it's a little bit different mentality. That's all.
Well, makes sense. I mean, that makes sense. There's certainly some issues.
How heavy is the swing, Fletch? You alluded to the fact, or maybe it was you, Dave. How heavy has it been? Like over the last decade, how much of the private schools won, and how much has it been East swung? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
I didn't have a chance to look at that. What's the breakdown there, though? That's an interesting part of it.
Yeah, I know that like 70% of the championships have been won by either private or non-boundary schools in the last 3 years. That much I do know. I don't know what the breakdown geographically is on that, but.
Mm-hmm. And the schools that are winning, like they're private, or are they charter, or are they?
I think they're a combination.
Okay.
Yeah, the one in Philadelphia, I guess, was it the football championship 70 to 35?
Yeah.
The score was the game was 70-35.
Yeah.
Who was it? Because that might give me some. If we talk about this again, it might give me some perspective.
Let me look it up here.
Who was it? I'm curious because I think depending on who it was, that might tell something here too. You know?
Yeah. Emma Hoff, or what the heck is the name of that school?
I don't know.
We don't have to spend the time now. I'm just curious as I think about this issue, though. Like from the standpoint of the competitors, how far is it and why? I mean, and when we're talking private schools, we're talking Catholic high schools or private, non-public.
You look here in Pittsburgh. I mean, Central Catholic is a perennial power.
Yep.
They're definitely a recruiting school. I don't think anyone would deny that. But at the same time, the kids who go there get an amazing educational experience. They get part of a network there. That's maybe the most valuable thing about going to Central Catholic is the network that you're a part of. That, a lot of the politicians here in town are Central Catholic graduates. And it's, so for me, if my son had that opportunity or wanted to go there, I would do it absolutely in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's what Dave said. So do you think that this argument is coming from places that, because they can't offer that, they don't want to acknowledge that they're going to have to change how they think in things?
Well, I think there's a number of forces involved here. I mean, I think Dave is right. A lot of this is coming from parents who, I'm sure you guys have met a lot of these folks who are reliving their high school years through their children. And, they're thinking about those, and they want that championship that maybe they didn't get. So there's a lot of factors here. But, the fact is, in my mind at least, we're losing sight on what the real issue is. And that's just a question of equity across education. Athletics is a part of it, obviously, but it's the entire educational experience that needs to be revamped around you.
I mean, that's so.
Now, let me throw one more thing in this. This is interesting as we think about this, if we talk about this again. Now, we have some friends over here who their kids aren't necessarily athletes in the past. And they would much rather go to the public school. And I said, why would you much rather go to the public school? I live in the suburbs in New Jersey, so we'll qualify a little bit. But better resources, better computers, better teachers.
Oh, absolutely.
They would much rather have their kid go to the public school as opposed to, there's a couple really good, like I guess they're Catholic private schools in New Jersey, like in Camden County and in Burlington County, but they cost an absolute fortune. So sports has absolutely nothing to do with that. It goes back to the fact that the education is better. So if somebody had the chance, though, depending on where they are, primarily, I guess, urban areas and some other areas that are in various stages of transition, had a chance to get a better education and get a chance to, why is that a bad thing? I don't understand why that's a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing. And it is, I mean, my alma mater, Greensburg Central, when I went there were kids of all economic levels going there. They made it affordable for you to go if you couldn't afford it. And there were 1,300 kids in the school at that point. Right now, I don't think there are 400 kids in the school. They have made it a little over the top. You're paying for college twice if you don't have the means or you don't get the athletic scholarship to go there.
Right.
So those are certainly good points. I mean, that was one of the reasons I didn't send my kid to Catholic school is, I didn't want to pay for college twice. And if she had gotten a scholarship to go, I sure as hell would have sent her in 2 seconds.
It's similar to our baseball discussion last week. There's only so much you can correct. You can't make everything in life a level playing field. I mean, I don't have anywhere near the brains to be an eye surgeon or a rocket scientist, so I'm not going to be that. I mean, if you're in certain locales, you can certainly make the education the same, Fletch, like you're talking about, but some other things you can't.
Well, not even so much the education, Gary. I'm more concerned about the opportunity for the education.
Well, that's right. I agree with
you. And then you look, for example, you look at some of the smaller schools. They don't have the ability to have advanced classes in physics and chemistry and that because they don't have the population to do it. They don't have enough kids there. So those kids, by virtue of where they are, don't get the same opportunity as someone in like a Mount Lebanon or an Upper St. Clair. And that, to me, is a problem. Whether it's, to me, I agree with you. Life isn't fair. But you know what? We want to give our kids all the same opportunities. Whether they thrive in an environment or not, that part of it is on them. But at least I want to give them the same opportunity to succeed.
But politicians should be worried about the fact they got a big forward and a small forward who went there to play basketball.
I agree 100%.
So I'm with you guys completely. Thinking about this literally for maybe the first or second time, perhaps. I'm not really sure what football and basketball and whatever programs in Pennsylvania with the weather that really are that significant have to do with that. So I guess we're all on the same page on this one. Is the way it feels to me. So
good. Well, we're gonna switch gears a little bit. We're going to talk about a project that the three of us have been involved in, writing a book called Unlucky 21, which is some of the saddest stories and unfortunate stories in Western Pennsylvania history when it comes to sports. As the stories and chapters have been coming in, I mean, it's looking like it's going to be a phenomenal book, and I'm real excited for getting this out there. We should be out and published by September 1st to mid-September, in that range. But some of the things that the book is focused on, while it's not all about upsetting games that we went through, there certainly are some of the most memorable, unforgiving memories, so to speak, in Western Pennsylvania history. And there, in my mind, there are four games that come in that are discussed as far as being the most gut-wrenching moments in the area's history. One that's not talked about a lot is 1908, the 1908 pennant race, arguably the greatest pennant race of all time in the National League. Always talked about between Chicago and the Giants, and and what a great race that was. When it comes down, the team that's not talked about is the one that could have won it in the end of the regular season, and that's the Pittsburgh Pirates. Faced off against the Chicago Cubs. With a victory, the Pirates win the pennant. With Vic Willis, who's having a tremendous season on the mound against the great Three-Finger Brown. Pittsburgh ties the game in the top of the sixth and seems to have all the momentum going forward. And Vic Willis and Howie Kamnitz, who was also a great pitcher for him, fall apart in the last three innings, and the Cubs end up winning 5-2. Pittsburgh is forgotten about in 1908, and the Cubs and Giants face off for a one-game playoff for the pennant. That's the least known of the four. The other two, it's Gut Punch A and Gut Punch B for everybody who was alive to see it. The 72 NLCS, the Bob Moose wild pitch, the Justy giving up the bench home run in the top of the ninth as Pirates come in with a lead, and probably, in my mind, the strongest. I was born in 1961. This was the strongest Pirate regular season team in my lifetime. Well, it was a 72 team, and just a tragedy in my mind not to see them be able to defend their world championship. 92. Anybody who likes Francisco Cabrera in Pittsburgh should be pummeled out of this area without question. Pittsburgh going in with a 2-0 lead, knowing on the horizon all the stars were leaving, and this was their last chance. As we found out, for 20 consecutive years, they would lose after this game, have losing records. And you go into that final inning up 2-0, and Francisco Cabrera. I just can't say that name without just fumes coming out of my ears. So many things went wrong in that game. Jose Lean, who never makes an error. The short strike zone because an umpire has to leave the game early. Barry Bonds not going to the position that Andy Van Slyke tells him to for Francisco Cabrera. So many things. And the slowest man in the world, the slowest man that comes in fourth in a race of the three of us versus him, Sid Bream, scores the winning run. And, of course, the last game, the one that Gary's working on, you have 2 Stanley Cups in a row. You have your greatest team, again, greatest team in our lifetime in the regular season, the 92-93 Penguins, and an Islander team that has no business being in a Game 7 with them. Being up by 2 goals, the Penguins come back late to tie it, and you think it's over, and then they rip your heart out 5 minutes into overtime. Gary, which one makes you hurl the most?
I honestly still go back to that 92 Pirates NLCS game. I mean, I think that one to me is the one, you know, the of the modern ones that you mentioned. I mean, so many things. It was a full moon situation when you think about it. I mean, everything that could possibly go wrong that was small happened. In the top of the 9th inning, Brissett was generally a pretty good base runner. I don't remember exactly who he tried to score on the single or double of, but he made the turn just a little bit too wide. They cut him down at the plate. Yeah, you're right, Dave. It wasn't McSherry, but whoever left the game, Marcia took over. Marsh has the arrogance of umpires today. His strike zone was the size of a postcard. It caused a lot of things to happen in that game that shouldn't have. You know, Drabek pitched pretty well in that postseason. You know, but he seemed to be tiring a little bit. He just ran out a little bit more gas. Everything went wrong in that game. And then, to me, the crushing effect of what happened afterwards. I mean, the 93 Penguin loss was a significant one and a tragic one for me because I thought that was the best team. You know, in baseball, you never quite know who the best team is. You have records and stuff like that, but there's so much luck involved. But that Penguin team clearly looked like they were going to roll to another one. And the way that they lost was crushing. But they still were fairly competitive after that. You knew if the Bucks didn't win, major changes were going to occur. And every single little thing that contributed to that comeback loss. And you're right. I mean, just the fact that, you know, Bream was, you know, he's carrying a truck on his back. And he beats that throw by a split second. And LaValliere even came up the line a little bit if you look at it. Like, I mean, if LaValliere had probably stayed put and come close to the line, they'd probably get him. I mean, every little nuance of that just went completely. I mean, Belinda didn't have enough. You know, his curveballs were just sailing that night. They weren't cutting. I mean, everything that could go wrong in that game happened. So to me, that's probably the most crushing one of the modern era. I'd probably pick the 93 Penguins second because a lot of things went wrong in that game 7-2 during that whole series. But I mean, they you know, they had to make changes and financial changes were coming. The organization got in serious trouble 3 or 4 years later financially. There was questions whether they would stay, but they were still a pretty competitive team with a lot of stars. They won a lot of games. They didn't go as far. I think they played against the Panthers and lost. Other changes came after it, but I mean, to me, it wasn't as significant as that 92 Pirates loss. It's interesting you mentioned the 1908 game. I mean, you know, people forget about that. You're right, Dave. The media never talks about that aspect. You got to really dig deep in history. In baseball history to realize that if they had just won that game, they wouldn't be talking about any, you know, Merkel replay and some of that stuff. And, you know, they did, and there's a lot of controversy about Abaticio's drive down the right field line. You know, the crowd on the field in those days and that kind of stuff, you know, we're still not completely clear because in those days there wasn't the cameras and all that kind of stuff, whether O'Day and Riegler got it right. You know, there's some things you read that, you know, they got it right and they collaborated on it and the right guy was in the right position to make the call. And there's other things that basically Riegler said it should be overruled, you know, and whatever. Now, they still would have been behind. But we all know in baseball how games can change on a couple little things. So, I mean, that one's crushing in its own right, but because I didn't see it, I'd probably have to lean towards that 92 Bucks loss, and then probably second I'd put the 1993 Penguin loss, but for different reasons perhaps.
Right. Absolutely. Fletch.
Well, I'm surprised that neither one of you were brave enough to utter the words Merkel boner. That's that's the thing I've been sitting here waiting for.
He left that to you. Boner's your word.
Never have been discussed if Willis had pitched a 5-hit shutout.
That's true.
Davis.
I mean, all the Pirates had to do that day was win, and they were in.
Yeah.
And yet, how they're left out of that conversation, I agree with you, Dave, it's beyond me. But, for me, I agree, 92 was crushing only because we knew that was it. That was the last chance. That limited window was closing. I mean, the 72 team, that is my all-time favorite Pirate team. Dave and Gary, I know you're both Stratomatic guys. I managed that 72 team to 109 victories. That was like one of my all-time great Stratomatic managing jobs. But that team was, to me, was far superior to the 71 team that won the championship.
It was, yeah. I agree with both of you. It was. That was a fantastic team. And that whole Pirate era from 71 through even 75.
Yeah.
That was a fantastic ball club. There's no issue.
But then you look at what happens after that season. So you have, the tragic death of Clemente. You have Steve Blass, who was 19-8 that year and just maybe the most dominant pitcher in the league besides Steve Carlton. And it just fell apart. When Clemente died, that team didn't know what to do that year. 73, it was an awful year. There was a team that, you have Manny Sanguine starting in right field to open the season. So that was tough. I mean, and the other thing, guys, you look at that, at the Penguins team, that one, even though that was a horrible loss, and particularly the way they came back to even force the overtime. That to me, once they forced that overtime, I thought there's no way they're going to lose this game.
Right.
Then you get a post hit, and then at that point, once that post was hit, I thought, I don't have a good feeling about it. But at the end of the day, this was a team that still had won 2 championships. That 72 team had won a championship. The 08 team would go on and win the championship the following year in 09. But that Pirate team of the early 90s never won the championship. And for that reason alone, that has to be the most tragic of it.
Yeah. I just go with my gut on that one. I mean, you're right, Gary. It's tough to put yourself in a position where you can have any emotion. And to me, a lot of this, and a lot about the book that makes the book so interesting, is remembering the emotion. And it's tough to remember that 1908 emotion because, we're far away, nowhere near being born. But 72, I recall probably the lone time I ever cried at the end of a game. What a great team it was, and just no weaknesses. But I mean, you're right, Fletch. You had won in 71. I mean, you had the experience. There was no bankruptcy ensuing, so whereas bad things happen afterwards. Nobody could have projected Blass, who you're right, next to Carlton was the best pitcher in the league, if I'm not mistaken, finished second to him in the Cy Young that year.
He did.
And but you had the experience of winning, and even though you're crushed by Clemente's death and you're mystified by losing Blass with what happened, you still had a good core, and you still had a great minor league. 93, to me, pissed me off more than anything because that team was so vastly superior to the Islanders, and to me, any other team, the blow was made a lot better. You are correct, because you're coming off back-to-back championships. I think the one thing I remember about that irritates me is that seemed to be the year between 93 and 94 when the team wanted to get rid of the grinders and started going for skill. And to me, that mix is not one that's going to win you many Stanley Cups. You need a mix of grit and skill, as we've seen the last couple of years with the Penguins, to win a Stanley Cup, in my eyes. I thought that was the one.
And this year, that was the thing this year.
Yeah,
I agree.
Capitals,
yeah,
that I
absolutely.
felt was the reason that this Capitals team was not being regarded well enough. I mean, you need both. I agree.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and that to me was what comes out of that Penguin thing. Even though they certainly were talented and certainly had other opportunities at the Cup. And again, that's what we learned after 2009. They started going for for skill over grit. And to me, that cost them a few cups after there, or attempts at cups. But
yes.
In 92, I mean, I never remember feeling that sick after a game, knowing what was coming, not expecting, after Smiley and Bonilla go in 91, not expecting this team to win a division, thinking that they'll be good, but, you know, we're pretty much done after 91. And just, I mean, I remember the joy of just running to the division title, having such an unexpectedly phenomenal season. I expected them to be good, but not as good as they finished. And then down 3-1, battling back, kicking their ass for 2 games, and having a 2-0 lead and knowing, okay, it's going to be over after this year, but at least we're going to the series.
Right. And the other thing I remember about that series is the Bob Walk game, where he was much like Jim Rooker in '79, or a guy that you never thought was going to come out there and stop the bleeding like he did.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more. I mean,
that was,
turned the series, and in Game 6, you know, they equaled the series, and you think, okay, you know what? Maybe this time's different. They're finally gonna get over the hump.
Yeah.
And Barry Bonds looks like he figures out how to hit in Game 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep. And it I mean, there's not a game, even 72, there's not a game that to this day, 6 years later, still disgusts me every time. I cannot watch when they talk about it. I turn the channel. I would never even want to see a second of a replay of that game.
Yep, every single thing. Lean's error. Lean had made single-digit errors all season long.
Right.
He gets a hard smash, but he boots it. Starts the inning. It's like, oh boy, you know, like, I mean, it was just one thing after another. I mean, in that those last couple innings. And, you know, Drabek was pretty damn dominant through 7 and going into the 8th. I mean, they weren't touching him at all. Yeah. And, you know, you're thinking, okay, maybe this is a chance. And then all of a sudden it just completely, every little thing contributed to fall apart.
Yeah. Well, I know when Billy sent me the chapter, he did so with, he was just sobbing uncontrollably. I can't imagine what this did to his psyche, having to research this to do it. I mean, the chapter's phenomenal. And it hurt reading it, but it's phenomenal chapter that he did. But to me, he gets the MVP of the book, having to take the take the pill and do the research on the game.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have to be nice to him, or no?
For 60 days. After that,
right.
you go back to normal.
Perfect.
But it really, I mean, these chapters really, as they're coming through, are really telling a great tale of moments that to me are just as important in the history of this area. That tell the tales of these teams just as good. I mean, 92 tells you the tale of how that team was built in a phenomenal short time, and how it can unravel so quickly. 93. I mean, you're learning about the greatest team in Penguin history. As tough as the end was, I mean, that's something to celebrate a little bit there. And I know
you can't appreciate the championships unless you have the bad years. I completely believe that. I mean, we were spoiled by having that Steeler experience that we did. We really were.
Yeah.
And you really need to be rock bottom before you can celebrate the championships.
Yeah, absolutely. You understand where you've been, and just some of the strange things. I mean, your chapter on the 21. I mean, how weird is that not just three guys passing away so young wearing that number, but 3 phenomenal talents. I mean, look at Bill James, number 2 shortstop of all time. Clemente is a god in Pittsburgh, and Michel Briere, I truly believe, would have led this team to greater things had he lived for the Penguins.
And then there's the other one. Don't forget you have a number 21 for the Steelers who gets shot. I mean, it's just not a number you want.
Man. But anyways, we'll talk a little more about that as we get closer to
this topic. The one thing in this topic, when you put this out there,
please.
71 Pirates won, And one of the best series, quite frankly, a series that never quite gets the credit for the shifting tides in it. You know, as much as it should. Right?
Yeah,
I mean, the Pirates had won. The next year you think they're going to win again. They were the better team. I agree with you, Fletch, probably even in the year before. You know, goofy ending, unusual ending, but at least they had won.
Right.
93 Penguins, I mean, people still, despite that loss, if you look out there, and particularly in the NHL circles, you know, that Penguin team is still considered one of the top, 10, 12 teams in NHL history. Primarily because of personnel and the 2 cup wins, but it's still there. You know, the 1908 team, I mean, it's a shame what happened. They had other chances to win those playoffs, and they didn't. They lost to the Braves a few times, if I recall, that were horrible that year in September that they shouldn't have done. But they did come back, and they were the best team in baseball, and that 110 and 44 is still, that everybody talks about the Cubs 116 and 36. How much different is 110 and 44? I mean, that's amazing. In an era where,
especially, what did the Cubs win that year?
I mean, I think they finished, I went 103. That's one of the years we were talking about the other day, not in the modern era, but I think the Cubs won 103 or 104, finished 6 games behind.
That's incredible.
I think the Giants probably won in the 90s as well that year. They probably won 92 or 94. So, and they were miles behind. So, I mean, those teams all had a degree of success, whether it came before or after. The 92 Pirates, to me, were the best team over that 3-year period that we might have seen in the recent history, but they never won anything. And their loss completely changed the circumstance. So, to me, that's the one that I would pick, primarily because they didn't have anything you could hold on to as a fan.
Oh, yeah. And the other Philly does such a great job developing that point in the chapter. I mean, it really just you can see just the air out of the franchise going as you read through what he wrote. But again, all very important parts of our history. And as you guys both said, you gotta appreciate these moments to really appreciate the winning.
Dave, one other thing on that one, Dave, is our mutual friend and also guy who's writing one of the chapters, Jim Lachima, was telling me that at the time he was working for the Pirates, he was their media relations guy.
Oh, that's
and
good. Go ahead.
Their locker room was set up with the plastic, with the champagne and everything, and they were ready to go, and they had to rip that down as fast as they could before the players got back into the locker room.
Oh.
Can you imagine having to do that?
Oh, God.
There was some talk of that. I recall, in the media back here that they really shouldn't have done that. Like it's one of those things like not touching the conference final trophy in hockey and that kind of stuff. Like, I don't know what the process is, but I remember that, Fletch. That's right that you bring that up. And there was some talk about here, briefly back here, on whether it was on radio. I don't recall now, but about that issue that they kind of did. I don't know about how much I believe in jinxes, but it is an interesting discussion. That's true. So.
Well, he also said that he, because there were so many people that had come down to see them hopefully win the pennant, that he couldn't get on the plane going back for another 48 hours, and he had to stay down there and deal with the tomahawk chops and deal with just everything that was going on down. He said it was the worst 2 days of his life.
I'll bet. Yep.
Oh, man.
Wow.
One was likable,
too.
The Pirates were likable because they had a lot of workaday guys like Don Slaught and LaValliere and even Bouchel and those guys. Whereas the Braves were obnoxious. I'm sorry, they were just obnoxious to deal with a lot.
It was, and I seeing and going to the games in '91 and just having to endure that damn tomahawk chop, especially in Game 6 when they lose the close one. Yeah, I still, can't fathom going down there and listening to that. But, anyways, it'll be a great. We're going to talk a lot more about this. The project is just going to be phenomenal, and all the proceeds are going to go to help the Josh Gibson Foundation, which does a lot of great work talking about trying to get educational opportunities in the inner city. They do great work trying to open those opportunities up for some of those kids, and just very proud we're going to have the opportunity to help that great organization. But we'll talk a little more about that. But we're gonna go on our lightning rounds right now, which is I know Fletch, your favorite part of the day. So the first one we're going to talk about the memorable moments of the weeks past. Mine is Brooks Koepka winning his second consecutive U.S. Open, the first, I believe, since Curtis Strange in '89 to do it. But my great thing is that this golf course screwed the golfers, and I love it. This should be a test. This is the greatest tournament in golf, and it should be a test. It shouldn't be made where birdies are the norm and not something that or a rare commodity when you hit a hell of a shot. And I love nothing more than hearing the constant whining of how unfair the course was to me, how unfair, Phil Mickelson getting pissed off at it and hitting the ball before it stops. To me, that's the way every course should be set up, is like a U.S. Open court. It should be, everybody's doing the same course. And it should be a reward to get a birdie. These courses that are set up week in and week out where everybody gets 20 under is, to me, the equivalent of putting a home run fence at 250 feet so everybody can have a home run. I just love it, and I love when they start whining, and I love when the winning score is over par. So, to me, kudos to him for surviving a second straight year. Fletch.
Well, Dave, that's a great one. I definitely considered that, but I couldn't decide, so I have two, and they both happen at the so-called worldwide leader in sports, ESPN. And it started with Tony Reali's heartfelt on-air reflection of losing a child. I don't know if you guys saw that.
No.
But it was on Father's Day. He had his Instagram post where he revealed that he and his wife were expecting twin sons, and then the lead up to childbirth, one of the sons named Amadeo died. And the other child was born early in emergency delivery. That child's home and doing well, but, Reali came on, and I always thought he was kind of a smug guy, but he came on, and I'm telling you, it was all I could do to hold back tears on this thing. And he was talking about grieving. And I'm going to read you guys a quote that he said, and I spent time pledging that it's okay not to be okay. And for me, the recognition that I've come to in this life is out of our control, and that's okay. It's how we respond and what we do, and that's what we have control over. So here's where I am today. Grief is a part of humanity. Grief is proof of humanity. And then he goes through and he talks about this, and it's very, you're watching this and you're feeling this incredible pain that he has. And then at the end, he does something that's completely unexpected. And he said, but I need to say this now. And it's more duality, if I'm brutally honest. Today, my thoughts are with children in cages. That's parents experiencing loss, too. Humanity needs to be better. And, here he is. He's lost a child, and he's challenging the rest of us to stop this immigration policy, to say that horrific things happen in life, and he's able to step out and share that with everybody and really remind us where sports are in the overall thing of life. It was a very, very powerful moment.
Wow.
And the other thing that happened at ESPN, and it's not, I don't know about you guys, but, for me, many of my morning commutes were spent with Mike and Mike.
Right.
And those guys, their show ended last November, but at the end, it was pretty ugly. Those guys were barely speaking to each other. It was an awful thing. I don't know if they were making any reason for them not to be together. And then this last week, they were both inducted into the National Radio Broadcasters Hall of Fame, and they were very entertaining together. That marriage, again, it grew very ugly toward the end of the show, and they hardly spoke. But at this induction, there was a thaw, and Greenberg said that working with Golick was the best thing that happened to him professionally, and Golick had something similar to say. So for a fan, it felt like a little bit of closure. This was for me, it was like watching a divorce. And seeing these guys be able to come to grips with that and make up a little bit, that to me was a great sports story this week.
Oh, man. Very good. Two very good ones. Awesome. Gary.
Well, Fletch, last week you called me a heartless whatever, okay? So I'm going to show you that I'm not. And I thought it was a great moment. Did you guys see the kid that was supposed to throw out the ball at the Cincinnati Reds game on Friday night? Did you guys see that?
Yeah, I saw that.
Yes.
That, to me, in a slow time of the year, with some other stuff, quite frankly, was a great sports moment for the past week. I thought the kid was unbelievable, precocious, entertaining. They take him out there when he's 2 feet in front of home plate. He's like, no, I don't want to do that. I got to move back. He moved back another couple feet. He says, no. I'm here. I'm on a big league field. Take me back to the mound. Of course, he couldn't throw it more than 2 feet. But I thought that was fantastic. I thought the kid was fantastic. I thought the Reds handled it fantastic. And it's funny, you talk about ESPN. I don't love ESPN anymore, but I thought that the way they handled that was actually pretty good in the little bit of TV that I could get to over the weekend in particular. So I would say, to me, in a week that's kind of in between a lot of stuff, I mean, yeah, you have the Wimbledon tournament. You know, you have the golf tournament. I agree with you, Dave, on the golf tournament and the golf mentality completely. Yeah. But to me, I'd probably pick that kid, Fletch. So I'm not quite as heartless as you sometimes think that I am.
Gary, if you were here, I'd hug you right now, buddy.
Right. I think that, to me, was the best sports moment of the week as I look back in a time of the year in particular that's a little slow, I admit, but I thought it was fantastic. And I thought the kid was fantastic during that situation, how 2-3 times he kept pointing, no, I'm going to the mound. I'm supposed to pitch. Right? I thought that was just absolutely fantastic. And the other one is a little less feeling, but I think it's I think finally, some of these awards that we keep going through in all these sports start getting more and more on my nerves. There was a little bit about the NHL awards that was on my nerves, but hooray. I think they finally got it right. Taylor Hall, in a franchise that has no really significant, even though it's in the New York metropolitan area, it's a team that doesn't get a lot of attention, doesn't generate a ton of money for the NHL, probably somewhat of a loss leader. Finally, people got it right. Yes, MVP is not on the best team, not the most exciting like McDavid. The MVP is the guy that, quite frankly, lifts up his game and lifts the team with him. You couldn't argue with Taylor Hall getting that award, and I think they got a lot of the other ones right as well. Yeah. Kopitar has been
more than 150% with you.
Taylor Hall, to me, MVP. You could be on a last place team, you could be on a first place team. What would the team be without you? Is the definition of that award. Not popularity, not speed, not excitement, not even winning. Not even a winning team. Finally, we got it right, and I think they got a lot of the other awards right, too. Kopitar's been a good pro, never disrespected the league. He's been in that Selke. He may have won one more, I think, but I think he is, quite frankly, the center that nobody wants to see. Yeah, I think they got that right. They obviously, in Vegas, didn't take a rocket science to do it, but they got that right. They awarded it. I think we finally got some things right versus a lot of these awards now, which to me have become a lot more, even though we talk about all the statistical numbers and all that kind of stuff, they become a lot more crazy subjective. Finally, we got those right. So to me, that was a highlight of the week for me. Hall win.
Gary, I'm going to give you an award, too, tonight. I'm giving you our version of the Lady Bing. How's that?
There you go, Fletch. Nobody ever accused me of the Lady Bing in my life, but I'll take it for this. For this show. So.
Oh man! Now finally, our bold predictions. I'll start off. We, in my eyes, are having the single greatest World Cup I've ever seen. They go by Germany, with Germany tied with Sweden, and a tie ends their as favorites of the World Cup, ends their quest to win again. And all of a sudden, this guy, as time is running out, makes just a shot from an impossible angle that curves in to give Germany the win. They blow the whistle seconds later. My son, who was in Germany and had to endure the opening loss, he's sitting around watching it, ends up getting on a plane for Iceland as they score the winning goal. So we know who the jinx of the German team was at that point. But that was a great World Cup, and I see Germany. I'm going to make my finals prediction, which Germany, I still think they're the most talented team, and I think this victory is going to wake them up and send them through to the finals. And I'm going with in my eyes, a huge upset, England defeating Brazil in the quarters and ending up in the final, in their first final since 1966, which would be a stunning development. But I just look at them; they're, to me, the strongest team at this point, as far as the way they're playing. But that is my bold prediction of the week. And now to you, Gary.
I don't know how bold it is, but I was going to say something about Trotz, which is obviously big news of the week. I'd probably put that as a 3A as far as memorable parts of the week. How many times do you have a Stanley Cup winning coach go to an organization that's been perennially in the bottom of the division? Right. I think I'm not great at this, guys, but I guess my feeling is come July the 1st, despite all the rhetoric, I predict that Tavares is going to go to one of those 4 or 5 teams that have been listed out in the national media. I think that's not a huge – there's not a lot of surprise in that, and it's not even that bold. But I kind of felt watching him up close and seeing him play and stuff like that, he just had a look of a face like, God, I can't wait to get out of here. So despite what he says about, supporting the Islanders and stuff like that, I'm guessing Vegas because he's probably going to think they have a chance to win, and he can really help that team. But that's about the biggest prediction I can make. I was going to say maybe Nadal might actually win this time over on the grass, if he gets very far. But on the other hand, I'm not enough of it that I'm willing to be that bold. But, Federer's getting a little older, so I guess my 1A might be maybe Nadal might actually pull this off this time, because of just what's happening in that sport. But that's where I'm going to have to leave it, Dave.
All right, those are good. I think that the Tavares thing would be, with everything you hear out there, that would be a bold prediction. So
I don't think there's any
chance
he's going back to the Islanders. I think he's going to be going to somebody after all of those years of ups and downs. I think this year, in the early part of the year, they looked like they had a chance, and they completely fell through the floor again. I think that sealed it for me. I just think it's only a matter of time. I'd be willing to bet you it's July 2nd that there's a signing of him going somewhere else. So,
all right, Fletch.
Well, guys, I'm looking west, and you guys know that I'm a big Lakers fan. So, here's my bold prediction.
I don't know where I like where this is going, but go ahead.
Despite having had a meeting to address it, once again the Lakers will be found guilty of tampering with potential free agents. The Lakers co-owner and Governor Jeannie Buss called the meeting. They had Magic Johnson leading it as well, talking to everybody through the staff because they don't want to make any mistakes. They're in the LeBron sweepstakes. But, keep in mind that Magic Johnson was fined $50,000 for this. The Pelinka had a $500,000 fine for talking to the agent for who was it now? It was Paul George. So they brought everybody in there. They had all the employees. They received written notices on the matter that referenced possible termination as punishment for anyone who does not adhere to NBA rules. So it's going to be even more of an embarrassment when it happens again. And guys, Magic Johnson's going to slip up, or somehow Kobe is going to be involved with this, involved with the team, and they're going to get caught again. That's my bold.
That is bold.
That is a bold one.
You caught me off guard.
Yeah,
I thought you were going to tell me the Cavaliers are going to get the first pick in next year's draft.
I'm trying to be gentle with you, Dave. I'm trying to be gentle.
I know. As you tell me not to quit it every time I tell you the Dukes are going to the NCAA tournament.
Oh, just stop that.
I've come to grips with the fact that maybe LeBron won't be homesick.
Right, like he was the last time. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, the seriousness of that, though, Fletch, if you're right, if you're even remotely right, that's pretty frightening. That tells you how disorganized the organization is internally. Because the three of us here, living in Pittsburgh, having no professional basketball organization management experience, to sit down and say, we better make sure we understand every rule before we do something foolish.
Yeah, exactly.
That were to happen, that would be something that would really make you wonder, should you be watching those purple and gold uniforms so much? Because there's really no excuse for that right now.
$500,000 fine the last time.
Mistake. Right. Wow. If you're right, that would be, that's funny, but it's not funny. That would be alarming, right? In an organization of that size and magnitude. So.
Hugely. And that is the boldest prediction of the evening.
Yes, it is.
Oh, man. Well, gentlemen, next week we will meet again. And we will have some nice topics to talk about. I'm feeling a Baseball Hall of Fame discussion coming up soon.
Ooh.
All right. Get out your get out your steroid bottle.
Slide rules and books and dusty books and sporting newspapers and everything else. And Fletch, pull out those Stratomatic cards, will you? I mean,
that's right.
And guys, I'll be expecting a urine sample from both of you before we have that discussion.
I'm not using my friend.
I can't go down that road anymore. Too many other things that would be of an issue. So I like doing these podcasts, so I'm going to stay away from that one. So.
You stay away from that one, and Fletch, I don't want to see you in Larry David's juicing situation. The little blue pill. Oh, man. Until we meet again, gentlemen.
All right, David. What were the nicknames again, David? I'm what am I again today? What am I?
Oh, you were the Mad Stork.
I'm the Mad Stork.
You know, I thought it would be redundant to call you Broadway Joe Chris. So I just cut out the Joe and, you're Broadway Chris.
There you go. There you go.
All right, guys. Have a good night.
All right.